So I'm showing you here is a quilt that has a binding that has scraps used for the binding. And I just used the same scraps that you'll see in the quilt itself. These were the leftovers. And so we're going to show you today how to do that.
All I have to do is hold out some of my scraps and I press them that I know will be at least 2.5 inches. And I am not going to worry about their length that much. I have a 2.5 inch ruler, so this makes this really easy to do. And when I get a nice big stack, I will then piece them together. I'm not going to worry about them being on a bias for this one, and I'm not going to worry about having a bias angled, mitered seams. I'm going to go straight with this because it's going to work really well for me, and I don't need to have the forgiveness of the bias for this quilt. Binding is pretty much straightforward, so straight a grain is fine with me. And now that I have a bunch of these strips cut, and I'll be cutting some more, but I've decided I want all of them to be 10 inches. I think that's going to look really nice around the outer border of the quilt because we're only going to see this much of it, but I think that'll be nice. So I'm going to cut all of these to 10 inches. I'll do a few at a time. I probably will start stacking them, so I'm doing 4 or 5 at a time. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to take these, they're all roughly 10 inches, didn't have to be perfect, and I am going to now sew them all together with a 1/4 inch seam. I am going to be using those scraps. Where did they go? I dropped them. Hang on a second. Those scraps. Finding the end, finding the end, finding the end. Okay, so there's my 2.5 inches that I have now folded over and ironed. I am going to be leaving a tail about at least 10 inches there. This is the corner of the quilt. I'm going to start down a ways. I always start a bit down. I'm going to start right about here. And then I am going to sew 1/4 inch, folded together, this right onto the edge of the quilt as soon as I turn my machine on. Here we go. Okay. So I'm coming up to the corner, so let me get a little closer and I'll show you the corner. Now I am going to continue sewing this binding up till 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to take it out of my machine. I can feel it right about there. One more. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this around so I get my corner going here. Now corners are not difficult once you figure out what it is you need this fabric to do. So I'm going to be turning it up on itself. Let's see if I can get you a better. Turning it up on itself. Here we go. So that I have a nice 45-degree angle right here that comes right out to the corner of the fabric. And I'm just going to press that a little bit in place. Holding that down, I am going to now bring this straight down on top of it. Now I can feel that 45-degree angle. I am going to put my needle in just right where that is at. at a quarter with a quarter inch, and sew with my foot down. There we go. So here's that corner we just sewed, and you can see it'll look like this where we folded it over. Now when I am going to be sewing the binding to the back, as I come around this corner, we're just going to flip it inside out. And I'm going to I'll show you. Flip it inside out. I will be sewing by hand right here. Then I'm going to fold this, so again we have another 45-degree angle, and you can sit and match it up to make sure that your fold, and you can play with it a little bit, make sure your fold is exactly the 45 degrees. Get these threads out of the way as you're sewing. And this is where it's nice to have the binder clips, so you can see here's what the back is going to look like. It has that nice 45 degree, and here is the front. It has that nice 45 degree. Okay, so at the end of your binding, you're going to leave about a foot, about 12 inches here in between your two tails, and you're going to need that room to work. Now what we're going to do is get this in front of you. I'm going to get this in front of me. Alright, so here is my binding. I'm going to finger press that a little bit to make sure we have that nice and pressed. Okay, what I'm going to do is I am going to turn this up, and I'm going to finger press this. Actually, you know what, I'm sorry. I'm going to open this up, and then I'm going to turn this up, and I'm going to finger press it. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do, I want to give it a nice, good finger pressing. My iron has cooled down, but I'm going to go ahead and just try to use that to finger press it, to iron press it. Next, I take my right hand side, and I am going to do the same thing. Open it up, okay, and this time I'm going to fold this one down. What I want is for them to fold right together. Okay. And then I'm going to finger press that. Again, I'm just going to use the flat of my cool iron. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to cut a 1/4 inch. And I'm just going to eye it. Now this is just how I do this. Some people do it differently. But I know I need to sew these together so that when you sew them together they make this nice line. So again, I can see my 1/4 inch. I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch. Now, this is why you needed room at the end of your, because now you got to get it back into the sewing machine. Okay, so I'm going to fold my quilt here in half where I have and I am going to put, okay, so you can see it's going to go just like that. So I'm going to lay those together right on their fold lines. That's going to be my stitch line. And the more room you leave yourself, the easier this is. I'm going to line them up so I have this nice V right here at a 1/4 inch. And you can see there's my fold line. Okay, and I'm just going to follow that fold line. And it's okay if it isn't perfect. Now when I open this up, what you will see is I can now press this, and this is all now going to sew with my miter. Now it looks a little messy right now, so let me just show you how this finishes out. Alright, here we go. Now if my iron were still hot, I would make sure that this is all very iron flat. So I'm just going to have to hold it down. Clips are good. I don't have clips on me right now, So I've got a little extra room. I'm just going to work that in, and it should be okay. Okay. If I have a pucker, I make sure it's on this side because you're not going to see this side. So I'm going to go ahead and let it pucker a little bit. It's not perfect, but sometimes these things happen. Okay, and I'm going to continue sewing. I've made sure that I can feel the bottom layer is flat. Like I said, I got a couple puckers here. I'm going to go ahead and let those happen, and let's see what we get. Pucker to the inside shouldn't be too bad, so let's see. I'm going to take it out of the machine, and when I open this up, I do have one little pucker there. I'm going to call that good. Now, if you don't like that little pucker, you can take that out and restitch that seam a little bit tighter so that you didn't have the extra fabric I have here. Sometimes you do have to fiddle with it a little bit in that way, but that is how I do it. So now when I roll this over and I hand stitch to the back, you got a nice binding.